Hello, welcome to the self-learning podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 21, Civil Society and Democracy. And our topic is Democracy, a Universal Appeal. Like civil society, democracy has also been a fluid concept across the times and places. Sharp contrast could be visualized between ancient Athenian democracy and modern liberal democracy, representative democracy and deliberative democracy, national democracy and cosmopolitan democracy. Yet a common theme runs through all these conceptions of democracy, that it is a condition where a community of people exercises collective self-determination. Through democracy, members of a given public demos take decisions that shape their destiny jointly, with equal rights and opportunities of participation and without arbitrarily imposed constraints on debate. Given the paucity of space, it would be sufficient to say that democracy is essentially participatory, consultative, transparent, and publicly accountable. By one mechanism or another, democratic governance rests on the consent of the governed. Emphasis added, democracy is constructed in relation to context and should be reconstructed when that context changes. Contemporary globalization constitutes the sort of change of situation that requires new approaches to democracy. According to Schmitter and Karl, for purposes of clarity and consistency, modern political democracy is defined as a system of governance in which rulers are held accountable for their actions in the public realm by citizens, acting indirectly through the cooperation of their elected representatives. Before we attempt to make analysis of the relationship between civil society and democracy, how far they could be complementary in promoting each other, it would be imperative to have a view of the overarching concept of civil society. Now let us move to the next point, the scope of civil society. The much of the current enthusiasm about the civil society is its fascination with non-government organizations, especially advocacy groups devoted to public interest and causes, and its concern of environment, human rights, women's issues, rights of the disabled, election monitoring, anti-corruption, etc. Such groups have been on the increase in recent years, particularly in the countries under influence of democratic transitions. However, it would be a misconception to equate civil society with mere NGOs, whereas civil society is a much broader concept encompassing all the organizations and the associations that exist outside the state, including political parties and the market-oriented organizations. It includes the plethora of organizations that political scientists traditionally label interest groups or pressure groups. Apart from NGOs, Labor unions, professional associations such as those of doctors and lawyers, chambers of commerce, ethnic associations, and others. The list is all comprehensive. It also incorporates many other associations that exist for purposes other than advancing specific social or political agendas, such as religious organizations, student groups, cultural organizations, sports clubs, and informal community groups. Emphasis added, no non-government organizations do play important role in developed and developing countries. They help in formulating policy by exerting pressure on governments and by furnishing technical expertise to policy makers. They induce citizen participation and civic education. They provide leadership training to young people who want to engage in civil life but are apathetic towards political parties. In theocratic and dictatorial countries, NGOs are overweighted by more transitional parts of civil society. Religious organizations, cultural organizations, and other groups often have a mass base in the population and secure domestic sources of funding. Here, advocacy groups usually lack domestic funding. The bargaining NGO sectors in such countries are often dominated by elite run groups that have only weak ties with the citizens, and for their functioning, they largely depend on the international funders for budgets they cannot nourish from domestic sources. Apart from these positive contours of civil society formation, it is worth pointing out that the mafia and the militia groups are also as much as part of the civil society as the other human organizations are. Some civil society enthusiasts have propagated the one-sided notion that civil society consists only of noble causes and welfare action-oriented programs. Yet, civil society everywhere is a mixture of good, the bad, and the outright pleasure. A random shuffling through web pages on the internet helps convey a sense of that diversity where one gets through the real scope of the civil society. If one limits civil society to those actors who pursue higher human aims, the concept becomes a theological notion, not a political or sociological one, which could injure the notion of society itself. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the Self Learning Podcast.